Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's Connect webinar with Tenzig. We're going to be talking about sharing user information securely and authentically with lots of good demo stuff for you today. So I'm just going to go through a couple of stuff real quick before we get started. Just a reminder that coming up in May, we have our first in-person XL event in 2 years, I think. So it's really exciting. It's going to be in Kansas City at the Arrowhead Stadium. And you don't have to live in Kansas City. If you're in the area or even if you're anywhere else, you are welcome to travel and join us. We've got some travel information on the website for you. Also, you can take a look at the speakers. We've got a lot of great Citrix content coming up. So check out the agenda and the speakers, and hopefully we will see you in Kansas City coming up soon. All right, so a couple of housekeeping details for you. We are recording today's presentation, and you will get a link to that recording tomorrow. It's going to come to you from GoToWebinar, so be on the lookout for that. Also, we welcome you to submit your questions in the chat anytime. We're going to take as many questions as we can today. Some of them we'll take verbally, and then some we may take offline, but definitely put in your questions. We love to get them so we can help you out. And you'll get a follow-up survey tomorrow. We just want to get your feedback on our webinars, and all those surveys are always anonymous, and they're super short, and they're for CUGC use only. So we hope you'll give us your feedback. All right, so with us today, we have from Tenzig, we have Stewart Hayles, and we have Chris Hayes. Stewart's going to be our main presenter today, and Chris is hanging out with Stewart. He's going to help with some of that Q&A. So hello, Stewart and Chris.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks so much for being here today. We also have, looking at your questions and helping with those, we have Jake Walsh. He's a CTA, and I think all three of you are based in the UK. So hello, Jake.
There we are indeed. Hello, thanks for having us.
All right, I'm going to hand things right on over to Stewart. So Stewart, I'm sending you the screen right now. And take it away whenever you're ready.
So hopefully you can see my PowerPoint screen.
Yep, I see it.
Okay, thanks for the introduction and housekeeping there, Stephanie. And hi to everybody joining the session, wherever that may be. So I'm Stewart Hayles, one of Tenzig's pre-sales engineers based out of our UK office covering the EMEA region, and having joined the company in 2019. Thank you for having us here at today's CUGC, and a big thank you also to all of you for joining me and taking the time out of your busy days. I'm here with a specially pre-recorded two-part video presentation that looks in particular at user authentication, focusing on SAML, the Security Assertion Markup Language, SSO, Single Sign-On, and MFA, Multi Factor Authentication. The main reason for us choosing this topic for today was due to an increasing trend we saw in interest from prospective Tenzig customers using Citrix and implementing SAML as an authentication method. So it seemed a good opportunity to demonstrate to the community how easy it is to access from a Tenzig device, along with a SAML setup demonstration. The first video, which is presented by our cloud solutions architect Jason Hudson, looks at the principles and benefits of SAML, SSO, and MFA. This talks about users, IdPs, the identity providers, and SPs, the service providers, and explains how they interact with each other and how the authentication process works between them. The second video will show you how to set up and demonstrate a single sign-on from our Tenzig 6048 QC Zero Client. Directed to Microsoft Azure SAML Identity Platform Service in the AAD via a Citrix ADC gateway as a service provider to gain access to our Citrix storefront environment. So without further ado, let's kick off with the first poll question. Can you display poll question 1, please, Jake? So poll question 1, are you using Tenzig thin or zero clients already? And we do appreciate your participation in these polls.
Just give it a few more seconds and I'll close that poll.
Okay. Okay, great. That's great participation. So thanks very much, everybody. Can you see my screen again? Excellent. Okay, let's give a quick background of Tenzig and our Citrix partnership for those who are not aware of us. We're a solely focused thin and zero client vendor and are specialized in Citrix amongst other VDI and end user computing products. We're headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona, with our EMEA office in Leicester, UK, and we are a founding Citrix Ready partner. Where we differ from competitors is that we are solely focused and our staff are skilled in Citrix through training and certification and take our customer service to the next level. We're also nimble enough to keep ahead of the development curve thanks to our R&D and support teams. We're a front runner in many Citrix innovations, including the more recent Citrix Ready Workspace Endpoint program and collaboration features including Microsoft Teams, Zoom VDI, Cisco JVDI, and WebEx, amongst others. Our company motto is that we make our product fit your environment and not the other way around. And this is more critical than ever in such fast-paced changing times. We have a range of zero clients plus thin clients based on a combination of Linux and Windows. Our Linux-based operating systems are developed in-house by our specialized R&D teams, whose primary focus is on remoting technology. All our endpoints are Intel and AMD based, and as you can see on our website at www.tenzig.com, include a wide array of hardware options, such as varying display connectivity, USB-C, fiber, and PoE. All Tenzig endpoints include enterprise centralized management via the Tenzig Manager, which offers cloud enablement for remote management and 100% free to use. We also offer a flexible free demo program for anybody wanting to trial our products in your Citrix environment. So let's begin with the first video where we look at the principles and benefits of SAML, SSO and MFA, and this will lead us nicely into the part 2 video where we'll set up and demonstrate our SAML environment.
Hi, I'm Jason Hudson from Tenzig Technology, and today we're going to be looking at user security, touching on MFA, but focusing in particular on SAML and single sign-on concepts. We'll be discovering what they're about and how they can benefit you and your organization from a security, service, and support point of view. In this video, we'll be talking about users, IdPs, which are identity providers, and SPs, service providers, and explain how they interact with each other and also how the authentication process works between them. In this section, we'll cover the basics of SAML authentication, how it works behind the scenes, the benefits of using SAML authentication, and how it streamlines user access to your organization's applications. So what is SAML, or Security Assertion Markup Language, to give its full and abbreviated name? SAML saw the light of day back in 2001, and version 2.0 came in 2005. SAML is an open standard and is often used to provide single sign-on to web-based applications and can be used for both authentication as well as authorization. So what are the main benefits of using SAML authentication? User experience. Since SAML offers SSO services, it reduces password fatigue from maintaining multiple passwords, offering a better user experience. Ease of use. SAML allows organizations to manage permission levels and application access for their users with ease. Security. Since SAML offers SSO using IdP, user credentials are stored in the more secure IdP rather than on every SP. Since communication between the IdP and SP use SAML tokens, it is inherently more secure. Platform neutrality. SAML allows integration with standard services like Azure Active Directory and IdP providers like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator to provide authentication services. And reduced administrative costs. SAML reuses single authentication and reduces the administrative cost of maintaining individual SP account databases by transferring this burden to the IdP. The SAML protocol has three entities: the user agent, which typically is the user's web browser, the service provider, or the SP, which is the application you try to access, and lastly, the identity provider, or IdP. When configuring SAML federation, you establish a trust relationship between the service provider and the identity provider. Let's explain at a high level how the SAML authentication flow works. When we talk about the SAML authentication flow, there are two possibilities with regards to where the flow begins and who initiates it. It can either be initiated by the service provider or the identity provider. SP-initiated flow sees direct interaction from the user by requesting access to an SP's application. IdP-initiated flow, on the other hand, sees the user first logging into an IdP portal, for example, then selecting from a list of trusted, pre-configured service provider applications that are available. First, let's take a look at IdP-initiated flow. In this flow, the user starts by accessing the identity provider, and the user is prompted for authentication. Once this has been done, the user can request a service, and if the user is authorized, the IdP generates a SAML assertion. Using the user agent, the assertion is sent to the SP using a post message, as it's the user agent who acts as the transport mechanism for the assertion. The SP verifies the assertion, maps it to a local user, and then the session can start. The second method of initiating the authentication flow is referred to as the SP-initiated flow. Here, the user starts by reaching out to the service provider, and since the user is not authenticated, the SP redirects the user to the identity provider using a request for authentication message. Once the user is validated, the IdP generates the SAML assertion. The assertion is then sent to the SP via the user agent, and the session can start. It's worth noting that during IdP authentication, this is where you would see any two-factor or multi-factor screens appear, if additional user security is required during the authentication process. This concludes today's session, where we talked about user security with SAML, MFA, and SSO. At a high level, we discovered what they're about and how they could benefit you and your organization from a security, service, and support point of view. We talked about the roles of users, service providers, and identity providers, and also the two different SAML authentication flows.
So I hope that first video presented by Jason gave you a good overview into the principles and benefits of SAML, SSO and MFA. Before we jump into the second video showing the actual demonstration and setup, I'd just like to ask the next poll question. Can we display poll question 2 now, please, Jake? So this question is, do your current endpoints support your SAML, SSO and MFA authentication requirements? And we'll just give you a few moments to have a think about where you are right now with your current endpoints. So I think maybe we can continue. So let's start the second video where we focus specifically on setup of a SAML identity provider in Azure. We're going to configure the Citrix ADC as a SAML service provider and show you how to set up and demonstrate a single sign-on process from our 10zig 6048 CUGC Zero Client. So this is pre-recorded live demo setup because it just wouldn't have been possible to get this done in the allocated time with the other bits and pieces needing to be covered as well. So here we go. Before we begin configuring our SAML environment, just a few things to cover. Prerequisites. These include items that are required but either not really necessary to be discussed here or, due to time, simply unable to include in this session to the detail required. You need a working virtual apps and desktops environment. A Citrix ADC installed with base configuration is licensed having a premium license file installed. A configured Citrix Gateway V server is configured, connected to my storefront, and in the current state simply using basic authentication via LDAP. For external and internal access to the ADC, split DNS entries need to be configured for the FQDN being used. Certificates for accessible FQDNs being used need to be installed for CRL check-in and securing client to ADC connectivity. Of course, an Azure tenant is required and synced if joined to on-premise domain servers. This needs to be licensed also to allow for enhanced security features such as MFA. And for the MFA process, you need a suitable authenticator app installed to a mobile device and configured for your account usage. Finally, to give a true single sign-on experience when using SAML, because the identity provider in its communication to the service provider does not reveal the user's password information, when you try to access a resource from the storefront, you will then need to enter your authentication details to access it. Using a Citrix Federated Authentication service gets around this issue using smart card certificates from a Microsoft Certificate Authority, which we are using in this demo setup, but is optional. And from what you see in the upcoming configuration steps, will work for SAML authentication to access your storefront. You'll just need to sign in again when then accessing any resource. So what are we going to cover in the demo? We're going to set up a Citrix ADC SAML connector for on-premise Citrix deployments in Azure AD. We will then install the identity provider certificate into the Citrix ADC to authenticate communication between the SP and IdP. We're doing it like this because if we try to install the IdP certificate when configuring the SAML virtual server, it asks us for a key file, which we don't have access to. Next, we will configure a SAML virtual server and use the App Federation metadata role copied from the Citrix ADC SAML Connector for Azure AD application. We're going to configure an N-factor authentication policy because if you bind the SAML authentication policy directly to the gateway virtual server, apparently this is considered deprecated and will be removed. So we configure an N-factor policy that is just an authentication virtual server with authentication profile. We configure storefront for the Citrix ADC gateway and SAML authentication. Then we can test the setup using a 10zig 6048 CUGC Zero Client and finish with some troubleshooting pointers. To integrate the Citrix ADC gateway with the Azure SAML identity provider, you must configure the identity provider application first with service provider information. I'm going to launch my Azure Portal Admin application from the Start menu. Once loaded, I need to select Enterprise Applications in the Services section. If you can't find Enterprise Applications in your list of commonly used services, then go to the search bar and start typing Enterprise and you'll soon see it in the list. If I click it, then I'm presented with a list of managed applications inside the Azure AD. If we do a search for Citrix, then no listed applications appear for the Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD that we need for this setup. To set up a new application, we click the New Application symbol at the top of the screen. Once this is loaded, you see a list of popular platforms and applications to choose from. A quick way to find the specific app you're looking for is once again to start typing the name of it inside the search box. So let's type Citrix again. Let's click Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD and you'll see a new window appear that gives us the opportunity to change its name. I'll leave the standard default name as is and then tag on the words 10zig demo. Once I'm happy, I click Create and you can see the status message displayed indicating that the application is being created. After a short while, we are then presented with an overview of the new application. Notice that you can see the name and any unique application and object IDs that were generated during the creation process. In the Getting Started section below, we have several options open to us. First, we have Assign Users and Groups, and this is where we assign any AAD users and groups that will be allowed to use this application. Second, we have Set Up Single Sign-On, and this is where we set up and create a connection between our Identity Provider AAD and Citrix ADC Gateway. We'll come back to this in just a moment. Let's go back to option 1, click on the Assign Users and Groups link inside the box, and then click the Add User Group link in the top left. For the demo, I'm just going to select my own user, so I just simply start typing my name. And then select it from the list. Once I am happy, I click the Select button in the bottom right of the screen, and then the Assign button. Now that I've assigned a user, you'll see me in the list. If I click the Overview link in the top left, it will take me back to Getting Started, and if I click Get Started inside the Set Up Single Sign-On box, we're taken into the Single Sign-On option screen, where we can see 3 further options: Disabled, SAML, and Linked. But for this demonstration, we want to use AAD, so we'll click the SAML button. Once inside the Single Sign-On screen, we need to complete section 1 first. This is where we tell the Azure IdP all about our service provider and where the request will be coming from. If I click on the Edit icon, top right of box 1, then I can complete the section fields that are required below. I just need to fill in the identifier, reply, and sign-on URLs, and we should be good then to move on. To start, we need to click the Add Identifier. So for this item, you normally have to enter your external Citrix ADC Gateway's fully qualified domain name. Once we've completed the identifier URL, then we just simply move down and click Add Reply URL. This time we can take the identifier entered above by using Ctrl+C and then paste it into the reply URL field using Ctrl+V. Finally, we append the value /CGI/SAML auth. We're going to add a sign-on URL. Click into the sign-on URL field and simply use the external Citrix ADC server's fully qualified domain name again. But this time round, we're going to append the value /Citrix auth service /auth service.asmx. So I click on the Save button, and you should then see a success message displayed. Let's close this box and see what has changed in the Setup section. We're now being asked if we want to test the single sign-on with Citrix ADC SAML connector. I may as well just say no, I'll test later for now. So now we can see the identifier, reply, and sign-on URLs we have just configured on the overview screen. For now, we don't need to worry about section 2, attributes and claims. Next, we need to create a certificate that will be used between the Citrix ADC Gateway and the Azure IdP for securing the communication. So underneath section 3, SAML signing certificate, I click on Add a certificate, and then at the top, just click on the button New Certificate. Now, further down, we've also got notification email addresses. So I already have an entry populated, but if you didn't have one, then you can enter your own email address here. Now that has been successful, I close the SAML signing certificate screen, say no, I'll test later. Now the certificate has been saved, we need to go back into Edit, and you can see now that the status is set to inactive. So we have to click on the 3 dots and then make the certificate active. Activating your certificate, we say yes, and then that has been successfully activated. So we can now close that screen, and now we see more details about the SAML signing certificate. So again, I'll say no, I'll test later. And here we've got our App Federation metadata URL. This we will use later on the Citrix ADC Gateway when configuring the SAML server. The metadata URL can be used to automatically retrieve information about your IdP to the Citrix Gateway. For now, From here, what we need to do is download the IdP certificate. We can download it in different formats if we wish, and also we can download the Federation Metadata XML also. But because we're using Citrix ADC 13.1, this isn't required because we can just import the information using this URL here. So I'll just download by clicking the blue download button. We've got a name here, so I'm just going to save it to my desktop. And then there is one last thing we need to do here to set up an additional layer of security by adding multi-factor authentication into the mix. So I can either create my own conditional access profile and add my app to it, or I can just piggyback off an already tried and tested profile by adding my Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD app to that profile instead. For the demo, I'm going to show you how to add your own service provider app to an existing conditional access profile. So from the search bar, I'm going to search for conditional, and now Azure AD conditional access appears. So I just click on that entry, and here we can see our existing policies. So let's go into this first policy here, and here we can see the details for the conditional access policy. So for our purposes, we're going to go to Cloud Apps or Actions and click on 3 apps included to be able to add our Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD app. And then where it says select, I'm just going to click on this link here and then search for our Citrix SAML connector. So I just put a tick next to the entry and I'm happy with that, so I just press select. And now that application has also been added to this conditional access policy. I just click on save, and now we're ready to set up our Citrix ADC gateway as our service provider. To begin my setup, I'm first going to sign into my Citrix ADC through a web browser window. From the menu down the left hand side, I'm going to go to Traffic Management, SSL, Certificates, and then use the option CA Certificates. I'm going to click on the Install button, give my certificate key pair name, which I will use as Azure IdP cert, and then click the Choose File button and browse to the location you downloaded the cert to from the Azure portal. When ready, click the blue Install button and the uploaded certificate will be then visible under the Unknown Certificate section. Okay, so next we go to Citrix Gateway, Policies, Authentication, and SAML. Switch to the tab labeled Servers and click the Add button. In the name field, give the SAML server a descriptive name. I will use Azure _IdP. Leave the option Import Metadata enabled, and in the SAML IdP metadata URL, we're going to paste in the App Federation metadata URL. So let's go back to the Azure Admin application. Underneath SAML signing certificate, we copy the App Federation metadata URL, go back to the SAML server setup, and then paste it into the SAML IdP metadata URL field. In the issuer name field, I enter the name that the SAML IdP is expecting from the service provider. Normally this is the FQDN of the Citrix ADC gateway. Azure AD calls this the identifier or entity ID and should be the same value. Now scroll down and click the Create button. Edit the SAML server again, uncheck the option Import Metadata to disable it, and you should then see that the fields imported are filled in for you. For the IdP certificate name, we're going to select the SAML IdP certificate that was exported from the Azure SAML IdP and imported to the Citrix ADC. The Citrix ADC will then use this IdP certificate to verify any SAML assertions from the IdP. From the drop-down list, we click on the down arrow, and then we select the Azure IdP certificate that we imported earlier to the Citrix ADC. The redirect URL is already configured from the import. The Citrix ADC gateway will redirect users to this URL. When finished, we can scroll down and click the OK button to save any changes. Do the following to create an Advanced Authentication Policy AAA virtual server and bind it to a gateway virtual server. First, go to Security, expand AAA Application Traffic, expand Policies, then expand Authentication, expand Advanced Policies, and then click Policy. At the top of the page, click the Add button, enter a name. I will use Azure_SAML. Change the action type to SAML. Then in the action, select the SAML server that we created in the previous step. In the expression field, enter true and then press create. Then go to virtual servers, still under AAA application traffic. Click the Add button, enter a name again. Set the IP address type to non-addressable and then press OK. You can optionally bind a server certificate here. It doesn't matter what certificate you choose, but if you don't bind the certificate, then the AAA virtual server will report as down, although will still work. I'm just going to click Continue for now. Under Advanced Authentication Policies, go to No Authentication Policy and click where it says Click to Select under Select Policy. Click the small circle to the left of the Azure SAML policy that we created earlier. Then press the blue Select button. I can then click the blue button labelled Bind at the bottom of the window. Click Continue. And then at the bottom of the page, click Done to finish creating the AAA virtual server. Now, go to Citrix Gateway and select Virtual Servers. Edit your existing Gateway virtual server. On the right-hand side of the screen, in the Advanced Settings column, click Authentication Profile. On the left side of the screen, find the Authentication Profile section and then click the button labelled Add. Enter a name. Again, I will use Azure_nfactor_SAML. And then where it says Click to Select under Authentication Virtual Server, I click the small circle to the left of the Authentication Virtual Server, and then press Select. Then click the blue Create button. Make sure you click the blue OK button before you click Done. If you don't click OK, then your changes won't be saved. On the Citrix Storefront server, go to Stores, select the store, then click Manage Authentication Methods. Make sure Pass-Through from Citrix Gateway is selected. Click the bottom gear icon on the right and click Configure Delegated Authentication. Make sure Fully Delegate Credential Validation to Citrix Gateway is enabled with a tick to the left, and then click OK twice. Go to Manage Citrix Gateways, and if none are listed, click Add. I have one already, so select the gateway and then click Edit. On the General Settings screen, we give the gateway a name and then set the Citrix Gateway URL to the FQDN used by our Citrix ADC. We have usage or role set to authentication and HDX routing. On the Secure Ticket Authority screen, ours is configured already to our DDC, but not if already done, configure your STA. Then go to Authentication Settings. On here, we enter a callback URL, which is required, otherwise the SAML authentication won't work. This is entered as the FQDN of our Citrix ADC. When ready, press OK when finished. Then press Close, and finally go to Configure Remote Access Settings, and ensure that your gateway is assigned to the store, and press OK to finish. And that completes our SAML environment configuration. We just now need to test it works. I'm going to demonstrate the Azure SAML authentication process using one of our NOS-C Zero Clients, which is 10-zig hardware running the NOS 64-bit operating system, our own Zero Client firmware optimized specifically in this case to be run in Citrix environments only. I'm going to start off with a factory default device and go through the initial quick setup wizard to show the simple setup process. The first item the wizard asks us for is the country the device will be used. This is to set the regional information on the client, such as time zone and keyboard layout. In my case, I select Great Britain, UK. We next set the time and date. This is used to verify any certificates installed are valid and not expired. Lastly, we get to the Citrix workspace configuration. There are a lot of configurable items in this area, but as this firmware is optimized for Citrix environments, commonly used items are by default pre-configured. If we were using Citrix Cloud Workspace, we could change the connection type field to Citrix Workspace Self-Service, but as we are connecting Storefront through our Citrix ADC, we leave it for now as Citrix Storefront Receiver for Web. In the server address field, I enter the URL used to access my Citrix ADC. With just these items configured and the correct certificates installed, the majority of Citrix environments using Storefront Receiver for Web should be accessible. There are more configuration items you can look at setting up, such as setting it to run as a kiosk client, whereby when the device boots directly to the Citrix storefront automatically, so the user doesn't need to interact with the NOS-C OS. But that is out of this session's remit, and I will go over some links at the end of this presentation to videos on our YouTube channel that will cover this in greater detail. For now though, I press OK to close the Citrix Workspace application settings. If I try and connect now pressing the login button, then I am presented with just a white screen. This is because I have a certificate installed on the Citrix ADC for my server address provisioned by GoDaddy, but I don't have the CA certificate chain currently installed on my client. So we need to install an additional intermediate CA certificate, and this can be done locally on the client using a USB storage device. Alternatively, if I had a Tenzig Manager instance installed, I could use that to deploy certificates remotely to clients. To begin, we need to go into the control panel by clicking on the cog icon on the NOS-C desktop. As a security mechanism, by default, installation from local storage is prohibited, so we need to enable this to allow installation of the certificates from the USB storage. This can be done from the Security Settings applet under the Systems functions of the control panel. I click Security Settings, and towards the bottom, click the white box next to Enable Installation from USB Storage, so that a tick appears to allow installation of the certificates. I can then press OK to return to the control panel screen. And now if I attach a USB drive with the certificates installed on the root folder, a USB installer window appears. And as you can see here, the installer utility will still only allow you to install certain files, such as certificates, printer drivers, firmware updates, and images for customizing the client more to a customer's corporate imaging. Installing certificates is a two-part process. To begin with, from the certificates area of the USB installer, I make sure that gdig2.crt, which is the certificate I want to install, has a tick in the box to the right of the file name. And when happy with this, press the Install button. Once installed here, we can close the USB installer and then open the Certificates applet from the System functions of the control panel again. From this screen, I first go to Manage and then press the Import button. I select my USB storage device containing the certificate from the left-hand side, which is normally listed as SDA1. I then select gdig2.crt from the list of files presented and press the Open button at the bottom of the window. Finally, as I want this certificate to be used for authenticating websites, I set the trust level to trust this CA to identify websites by clicking the box to the left of the name so a tick appears, and then finish by pressing the OK button twice and then closing the certificate applet with the Close button. We would normally disable the option to enable installation from USB storage to secure the client fully again, but for now we will leave it as it is. And that's it now from the Tenzig NOS-C side, all done. And for easy deployment of further devices, we could generate a template based from the configuration on this device in the Tenzig Manager, and then use that to auto-configure additional clients, including the installed certificate, so that they can be used right away after being deployed. More videos on using Tenzig Manager are available on our YouTube channel. So all we need to do now is go back to the main login window and then click Login. Wait a few moments and our Azure IdP sign-in box appears with the Tenzig corporate imaging. I type in my Azure username with domain and click Next. Key in my password and press the sign in button. Wait a few moments and then I should be presented with an MFA verification window. So remember earlier during configuration of the Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD in the Azure portal that we added our SP to an already set up conditional access profile to make sure that MFA was a condition of sign-in. That's the reason that we now get to see this credentials window appear, just as an extra layer of security. So I'll use a verification code from my mobile app. I then go to my mobile phone and then navigate to my Microsoft Authenticator app, find my account details, and then enter the one-time password code presented. I then click on the Verify button, and at this prompt to stay signed in, I'm going to say no, and then my storefront will be displayed. Now that we have successfully signed on using Azure SAML authentication, I can see my storefront and resources that are available to me, including any published apps and desktops. Now, as I touched on earlier when discussing the Citrix Federated Authentication service during the prerequisites, as SAML authentication does not obtain the password information for a user from the identity provider, when I wanted to open one of these resources, I would again be requested to enter my credentials to gain access. But because we have the Citrix Fast Server in place, this is giving me a transparent single sign-on experience, because in the background the storefront requests the Citrix Fast Server to use smart card certificates assigned to the users from a Microsoft Certificate Authority, and which are then stored on the Citrix Fast Server. So when a resource is accessed, as done here, the VDA requests the certificate from the Citrix Fast Server to authenticate and complete the Windows logon process. Accessing my personal W10 desktop, I am not requested to authenticate and log on automatically. Finally, I would just like to end this demo with some pointers on places to start looking if you do find yourself needing to troubleshoot authentication issues through the ADC or with the Azure Citrix ADC SAML connector. First, let's take a look on the Azure portal. I'm going to run my Azure Portal admin application once again. On here, I go back to Enterprise Applications and enter Citrix in the search field. And both the Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD and the Citrix Cloud SAML SSO applications are displayed. Click Citrix ADC SAML connector for Azure AD to access the application overview screen. From the menu down the left-hand side, look for an option for sign-in logs. You may need to scroll down if it is not visible already. Click this item and you will be presented with a screen displaying a list of logon actions and whether the attempt was successful or failed, for example. Clicking one of these individual items brings up another window with further details. The basic info screen gives details of the login attempt, and if the status was failed, a failure reason and additional details are shown along with possible troubleshooting steps to take further. You can also see details on the user's location and device used to access. On the authentication details screen, if using MFA through conditional access policies, you can see if the first factor authentication has been met, and then if the MFA requirement has also. Moving to the conditional access screen, you can then see which conditional access policy was applied to the sign-in attempt. Now let's take a look at troubleshooting from the ADC. We can gather further information using AAAD.debug from the Citrix ADC command line interface. That is useful for troubleshooting issues such as general authentication errors, username/password failures, authentication policy configuration errors, and group extraction discrepancies. To begin, we are going to connect to the Citrix ADC command line interface using a secure shell or SSH client, which in my case I will use PuTTY. I have this utility already downloaded and available on my desktop, so just double click the PuTTY icon to open the application. I enter the FQDN or IP address to my ADC and check that the connection type is set to SSH. If I want to look at this information that we're going to obtain now later on, I can also go to the login page, enable all session output underneath session login, and then enter a destination file name for where that information will be stored. Once then ready, we can press the open button to begin the connection. We're then requested for our authentication details. Once these are entered, the connection should be completed. So now we need to switch to the shell prompt. So to do that, you just enter the command shell, S-H-E-L-L. And then we need to switch to the TMP directory. So we enter the command cd /TMP. Finally, to initiate the debug, we enter the command cat AAAD.debug and then press enter. This will then allow you to be able to view the debug contents, which is updated in real time. You can then perform the authentication process that requires troubleshooting and monitor the output of the debug command to interpret and troubleshoot the authentication process. With SAML, you should be able to see the authentication request and SAML response from the identity provider. When you are finished capturing any diagnostic information here, just press Ctrl+C to stop the process, and then close your SSH client. And welcome back again, everybody. So that was probably a lot of detail to have in one go, but I hope you have enjoyed the content so far, especially what you just saw in the live demonstration, and that you found it useful and informative. I thought I would just show a quick slide covering some abbreviations, as you may have heard a lot of these being said in that last live demo setup video, and probably due to my bad habits with some of my pronunciation of terms is different to what others may use. So SAML I refer to as SAML a lot, and URL I normally say as URL. So apologies for that and for any confusion it may have caused. So just to summarize what we've covered in this session, the first video looked at the principles and benefits of SAML, SSO and MFA and how it operates. And then we followed that by showing you an example of a setup and demonstrated a single sign-on from our Tenzig 6048 CUGC Zero Client using a Microsoft Azure SAML Identity Platform service in the AAD and via a Citrix ADC gateway acting as the service provider to gain access to our storefront desktops. I'm putting up some useful Tenzig web links to additional useful content, including content covering our Citrix NOS-C Zero Client and also the Tenzig Manager application, along with some Microsoft Azure specific SAML related links. And of course, there are some Citrix guides listed as well, but I must give a big shout out and credit to Carl Stalhood and Manuel Winkle, whose very detailed guides I used myself to get SAML authentication working in my Citrix environment. Whilst the product documentation is extremely good, these guides in particular are very detailed and enable you to get the solution set up from beginning to end. Carl's also is bang up to date with the latest software versions. So if you're looking to include a Citrix federated authentication service in your setup as well, then these would be a very good place to start for more information on that. Before we host the Q&A session, could we have our final poll question, please, Jake? So the question is, would you like to receive a 10-zig demo device to test in your own environment? And for those of you who may be pondering this question, in previous sessions, the most popular answer is normally always A, yes. Okay, I think everybody's done that. So thanks for participating in the poll questions today. And thanks very much for attending this CUGC session. And thanks to Stephanie for hosting it. It's been an absolute pleasure to present and prepare this content for you today. So before we wrap up, I am joined by Chris Hayes, our EMEA Technical Support Manager, for the Q&A session regarding today's presentation. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to present them now. And if you do have any questions afterwards, then don't hesitate to contact your local 10-zig team and they will be happy to help.
Guys, I will jump right into some of the questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
So just the first one around the free demo question. How does that work, and what sort of devices are available and can be used?
That's a good question. Very good question. Thanks for asking that. All devices can be used in the free demo, and it is a just one moment actually, because that is the one question I didn't actually have any details for. That was from marketing. So
I can help out with that. So so a 10-zig sales rep can work with you to determine which DIN or Zero Client setup would be right to test in your environment, and the device will be shipped right away to you. It's a no hassle program, and you get the 30-day trial for the device. You're not under any obligation, and you can also use the free demo form on the 10-zig website.
Thanks, Chris.
Awesome, thank you. And in terms of, sort of demonstrating that device and testing it out, is that something you sort of support from a technical perspective as well?
Yes, we do. So we have the pre-sales teams which support when you're testing your devices in your environment, and obviously the technical support teams which are based in the US and in the UK for the EMEA region.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of devices as well, that sort of single sign-on and SAML authentication, is that available across sort of both, sort of Windows and Linux-based clients?
Yes, totally. So it's really down to the actual Citrix Workspace app. So there's not really an awful lot of specific functionality going on in the client side itself. So it works across both Linux operating systems and Windows.
Fantastic. Just got one question that's come into the chat here as well, around sort of support for different platforms. Obviously, conscious this is a Citrix user group community webinar, but obviously your clients work with different platforms as well.
Yes, we do. So we've got, especially Zero clients, we've got clients for VMware, Horizon, and also for Microsoft RDS services and AVD as well. But then we've also got a thin client operating system which can work across the board, Repurpose, which is for third-party hardware, which again can work across the board. And then we've got our Windows devices, which is very flexible across all the different VDI platforms.
Awesome, thank you. I've got a really good question here as well from Paul that's come in on the chat, asking, how does 10-zig differentiate themselves from other thin client solutions in the market? So kind of, what are those sort of USPs and sort of key factors that, that differentiate really?
Okay, I guess we provide total end user computing solutions, so you can get your thin client hardware from us, operating systems, endpoint management applications, and also we offer professional services for bespoke integrations and software customizations, which are all at competitive pricing and supported under one roof by the same support teams. We also offer free evaluation devices, free endpoint management for unlimited devices, and also a 3-year advanced exchange warranty, which is standard, can give you a next day replacement for any hardware issues.
Awesome, thank you. Just a couple of Azure specific ones as well. So in terms of licensing for the user accounts in Azure AD, is there a specific type that those users would need?
For the MFA access, if you want to be able to use conditional policies as well, then probably you need to be looking at either an Azure AD Premium P1 or Azure AD Premium P2 license, and we can provide more details on that as well if necessary.
Awesome, thank you. And in terms of the Citrix environment as well, are there sort of minimum versions required, you know, for the different components to support this solution?
When I was looking into this, pretty much it was sort of giving an indication that you should really be sort of running Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops 7.9 or later, and Storefront 3.6 or later. For the Citrix ADC Gateway, ideally it would be 12.1 or later. For the actual SAML access, it's just using a browser because it's just web-based authentication.
Real, thank you. Just in terms of the actual sort of licensing on the Citrix side, then, is there any specific licensing required on the ADC?
I think now, actually, for SAML authentication, it is supported on pretty much all the licenses available. So on the standard, on the enterprise and the premium licenses, you can now get SAML authentication for free.
Brilliant, thank you. Just having a look through the other questions that have come in. Just one question here about a recording, actually. Will there be a recording available?
Yes, I think you guys post it on your CUGC channel, and also we will have a copy also published on our Tenzig YouTube channel.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just conscious of time. I think we're pretty much there now, aren't we?
Fantastic. Some good questions, thank you.
Okay. Hi, it's Stephanie again. I have one last slide for everyone. Let me, well, yep, there it is. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stewart and Chris and Jake. Glad to have you guys with us today. I think that there's definitely some interesting stuff. I know there was one comment in the chat about making Carl Stallhead drool. So I know some of you may have opted in for a chance to win a $200 Amazon gift card. So the way that's going to work is as soon as I close out the webinar today, I'm going to pull the registration report and use a number randomizer to pick the winner. And I will email you, so be on the lookout for an email from me, or keep an eye on our Twitter at myCUGC to see who won the prize. And then also, I think all of the attendees are getting a free demo device trial. So that I think you'll get a notification about that if you opted in with directions for how to do that. And I think that closes us out. Thanks again, everyone, for being here today. And thank you again, Stewart and Jake and Chris. Appreciate having you here.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
All right, you guys take care. Hope to see you all again at another CUGC event soon. Bye.
Bye.